Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be going over a bit of a warmer pattern for the central and eastern United States with a much colder pattern in the western United States where we'll actually have a little bit of snow by this time next week. So we're going to be covering the snowfall briefly in today's video, but mainly we're going to be talking about the temperature pattern, and one of the main reasons that's happening is because of the negative PNA, which we currently have in place. So we're going to be covering that, talking about what all that means, and going over when these temperatures will start to move in. So let's start off with your current National Weather Service page. As you can see, it's very quiet today. Other than the temperature patterns, we really have not a lot to talk about. We have a few storms out in the Atlantic, but they're way out, nowhere near any land. So again, another one of those very quiet days, and this typically does happen in late September, early October. Usually we have a bit more going on in the tropics, but when you don't have anything in the tropics, usually this time of year is very, very quiet. So not a lot to talk about. Temperature patterns are really the most interesting development as of recent. Again, not many notable watches or warnings. Yesterday we had a high temperature in Death Valley, California of 100 degrees, and the low temperature was tied between Peter Sinks, Utah, and also 14 miles west southwest of McKay, Idaho. Both of them getting down to 11 degrees Fahrenheit. Highest rainfall report was in northwest Corpus Christi, Texas, where they got 6 inches of rain. And there were no snowfall reports yesterday. We have a few winter weather watches and warnings for Alaska, but really, again, not a lot going on as of right now. So here's the PNA, and this is the Pacific North America Index. So it covers much of western North America, so areas in western Canada, the western United States, even a little bit of western Mexico, and also the eastern Pacific. So it covers that entire area, and it basically shows you what the upper air temperature anomalies are within that region, and then it kind of just gives you a graph, which is much easier to look at than, of course, the maps, because you can get a good idea of the average for that entire region. Now, one thing that's very interesting is that these gray lines right here are what the previous forecasts were showing. So the previous forecasts were showing maybe just a slightly lower than normal PNA, nothing really too crazy, but these colored lines here, the orange, red, dark red, green, purple, these are all indicating the more recent model runs. And then finally this kind of black circled line right here is where we have the current model forecast run. So you can see that every single run was pretty much getting colder and colder with the PNA, and when you have a negative PNA, usually that indicates that you have a warmer eastern US and a colder western US. That's just generally how it works. So that's exactly what we're seeing, and I think it is mostly and almost entirely part due to this PNA out in the western North America area. So we do have this going all the way down to maybe 3 standard deviations below normal before maybe around the later part of October getting back near neutral, and then it's as soon as that goes near or actually above that neutral line that I would expect the eastern United States would turn colder, because in a positive PNA, normally the western U.S. would be warmer and the eastern U.S. would be colder. So I think as soon as this really passes that black line and moves above normal, we're going to see that pattern completely shift. So if you're a snow lover, you would want to have all those warmer days take place in September and early October and mid-October, because you're not going to be seeing snow in that time for most spots anyways. And if we were to get the colder temperatures right after that into November, I think a lot of more people would rather have a colder November than a colder October if you like cold and snow. So usually we only see these patterns stick around for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and it looks like that's happening right here. We went into that negative PNA around I would say around the 28th, 29th of September, and now we're expecting to leave that PNA, the negative PNA pattern, right around the 20th of October. So that's about 3 or 4 weeks. and we would expect probably another colder period right after that. Normally, we do not see sustained, very prolonged periods of one temperature pattern. So here's the upper air map, and this is going to be very useful and very important to look at. A lot of people look at the surface, and I do look at the surface as well because it is important, but really everything originates from the upper air and then kind of sifts down into the surface areas. So you're going to want to look at the upper air maps a lot more than the surface maps. It's always nice to look at the high and low temperatures, even up to 7 days out, but it's much more reliable and you'll get a better idea of what's happening if you look at the upper air maps. So you can see that we do have a bit of a high pressure into central Canada, and that is extending as far west as California and as far east as the Atlantic provinces of Canada. So very, very expansive high pressure, bringing in drier and warmer conditions. But watch out for what's happening up in western Canada, because it is actually colder in that area. They have a storm moving into that spot, and that will be bringing a bit of snow to the higher elevations with colder temperatures for that entire region as a whole. We do have some rain, which is going to be passing by the southern plains and the Tennessee Valley in the southeast, and that should allow for some of the temperatures to cool down by a couple degrees, but it'll ultimately stay within a reasonable distance of normal. So we're not expecting anything to be all over the place. We're not expecting anything to really be too far below normal or too far above normal within that area. Here would be by Wednesday, or actually let's go back Wednesday here, and you can see that we have a low pressure system into the southeast. So that's bringing in some of the rainfall, and then we have higher temperatures and high pressure into eastern and central Canada. So that's what's bringing in all those warmer temperatures for the northern half of the United States. We have colder temperatures for the west coast, and that is again due to that PNWA pattern which we have in place. And this colder air mass will be moving closer and further inland of the western United States over the next few days. So this is by October 6th, here to be by October 7th and 8th, and you can see that we have that low pressure system dissipating over the central United States. That high pressure is moving a little bit further to the northeast, which is bringing in a little bit of room for this low pressure system to move into the west coast a little bit more. So it's going to be very cold along the western United States. Now, mainly for the northwest is where you're going to feel that chill, just because in southern California, southern Nevada, southern Utah, or southern Arizona, you're not really going to feel that too much. It'll still be the regular 60s, 70s, and 80s, and even 90s in a few of those spots. But especially into the northwest, temperatures will get down into the even into the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, even in lower lying areas. So even areas like Seattle and some of the surrounding areas, eastern Washington in the lower spots, eastern Oregon, all those areas are going to get down into the 30s and 40s even. Closer to the coast, maybe you linger on to some of the upper 40s, but for a good majority of the northwest, you're going to be very cold, and not even that high up in elevation, you're going to be dealing with a little bit of snowfall, and we'll show you that in just a moment. That low pressure moves on to the land of the western United States. So right now, that would be a quite chilly pattern. We would have definitely a negative PNWA in place if this were to be the case. We have high pressure building over the southern United States, and then we have more high pressure exiting out of the parts of eastern Canada. So we do have that high pressure moving out, but another one that's about to replace it. More rain for the southeast in the form of a bit of a chillier air mass that's moving through. So here would be the high temperatures, and just to give you kind of an idea of how to plan out your week here. In the white colors, which you see up in British Columbia, the red and the white, that's where you're below 40 degrees. The reds are below 30 degrees. If you're in kind of this medium shade of blue, which you see in this area right here, that would be between 40 and about 50 degrees. What you see for a good part of central Canada is where you have those 50 to 60 degree temperatures. In the yellows, that's where you're about 60 to 70 degrees. And then once you're in the orange colors, that's where you're about 70 to 80 degrees. If you get into kind of this darker red color, that's where you're above 80. And if you're in this almost gray color, that's where you're into the 90s. So that's how you would read this map. And we're going to time this out for you guys. So this would be by Sunday, so tomorrow. And you can see that we have a bit of chillier air into the extreme Pacific Northwest. So you're really into the northwesternmost corner of the U.S. as well as parts of British Columbia and Alberta, Canada. But for the rest of the country, we're actually going to be fairly mild with the exception of New England as well as the upper Great Lakes. If we move this on to Monday, you can see that we do have some warmer temperatures along that southern tier of the United States, with warmer temperatures still kind of lingering on there for the central United States as well. But this colder air is starting to move into the northwest a little bit more each day. So this would be by Tuesday, and you can see now you're definitely starting to see that boundary zone starting to set up. You have 80s into eastern Montana, and as you get into Washington State, you have temperatures that are only topping out with your high temperatures in the 50s. So a much bigger temperature differential. That's about a 30-degree Fahrenheit temperature differential between those two spots, and there will be a big difference between the eastern and the western side of the Rockies when it comes in terms of the actual temperatures and the temperature anomalies. If we look at for Wednesday, you can see that definitely that colder air mass is now taking a plunge into the western U.S. with still a fairly mild pattern into the eastern and central United States. It will be a little bit chillier into some areas of the Tennessee Valley or the Ohio Valley, maybe the Mid-Atlantic, but really you're not gonna feel it too much. It will be raining over some of these spots, so that'll definitely be noticeable and something that you want to plan for. Maybe bring a little bit of a rain jacket or an umbrella when you're going to school or to work, but again, nothing that's going to be too crazy. We're not expecting any huge amounts of rainfall either. This will be by Thursday, and you can see that we do have a bit of a warmer pattern, or we're starting to see a warming trend into the southern plains. So these areas actually started off below normal to start off the week, but now by Thursday and Friday of this upcoming week, they're going to actually be a little bit above normal, getting temperatures into the mid 80s to the low 90s. So definitely quite warm in those spots. And then you can see that by Friday of next week, we have that colder pattern into the west, and the high temperatures, again, these are the high temperatures getting into the 60s, even for the lower lying areas. And if you were to look at the low temperature maps, we would be seeing lows into the 40s and the 30s for these spots. So it will be rather cold, especially later on in the week, and especially for the weekend of next week. So we're expecting a fairly cold pattern out west, and then you can see that by Saturday, we're seeing the high pressure in the southern plains building. So this area of high pressure is starting to heat up the southern plains, and that might actually start to flip around your pattern, because if you have this high pressure over in the southern plains, that may allow for that to kind of move further to the north. If this migrates to the north, then you would have a pattern where you have colder temperatures along the western United States, and then they curve down into the eastern United States where it gets a little bit chillier as well. That's of course all hypothetical, but is something that does happen sometimes and something that could happen in this scenario. Here's the snowfall map, and you can see that definitely quite a lot of snow into the western United States. And one thing that was kind of surprising to me was that it's not just the areas of central Idaho and southwestern Montana, which normally see snow in this time of year, but it's also some of these still quite high in elevation areas, let's say northern Nevada, but these aren't areas that are on top of mountains that are seeing all the snowfall. These are actually areas that are quite further down. You're about 5,000 feet up, so it's nothing that's way up in elevation, and they're still seeing snowfall in those areas, and it's actually about 2 to 6 inches. Now, not all of that is going to stick to the ground, but at least on the model projections, we're looking at upwards of 4 or 5 or 6 inches of snow. So definitely something interesting. I'm not going to make a video on that just yet, but and that's just because this storm would happen right around October 9th or 10th, so it's still way too far out for me to make a video on that. I've seen some YouTube channels making videos on this already with the snowstorm out in the northwest, but I'm not going to do that just yet because, of course, of how isolated and localized this event will be. So you really need to be precise with it, and you can't be that precise when you're 7, 8, or 9 days out. So I'm going to refrain from making a video on that just yet, but who knows, maybe another 5 or 6 days later, or 5 or 6 days ahead, I'll probably make a video on this if this is still being forecasted. Here's the 6 to 10 day outlook from the 7th through the 11th, and you can see that we have warmer temperatures all through the eastern and central United States, with a noticeable colder pattern into the western third of the country. And if we look at the precipitation anomalies, you can see well above normal for the northwest and also for the mid-Atlantic and the southeast, but it may actually be a little bit drier than normal into the southwest, as well as for northern New England. So that is going to wrap it up for today's video. If you have any questions or you want a personal forecast, just leave a comment down below, and I'll be responding within a few hours of you posting that. And I'll see you guys in tomorrow's video. Goodbye.